is frequently called on by any and everybody, like literally heads of state, political campaigns, people doing research that want an opinion on sociology, want an opinion on race. He's been New York Times, like 15 different op-ed pieces, just an amazing talent. And again, we're grateful that he chose to spend his Wednesday night away from his family to be here with us. So with that, Dr. Ray.
Light colors, basically the same. Historically red line areas. We cannot simply separate housing from income and wealth, nor can we separate it from education. And I want to walk you through some of the ways in which this operates. First, you heard about Tulsa. But unfortunately, Black Wall Street is not the only city to experience what we call kind of racial terror or massacres. This is what's key. So I want you to look at this. This is what Tulsa looked like. Predominantly black area, affluent, called Black Wall Street for a reason. Because we're going to get to why black people were out there in a second. Because what they said was, black people need to go make their own way, go make your own city. So black people went out to Oklahoma. This was during the time of the Wild Wild West. If you were like me, you kind of grew up watching Wild Wild West movies with your parents and your grandparents, and you used to see them just going out there. There weren't any laws, people just wilding out. They were wilding out because they were getting land. They were going that way, just founding cities. You know what? Nobody has this land. I'm just gonna 50 acres, they're all mine. That's literally what happened. It's called the Homestead Act. I'm gonna get to it in a second. What's key though, is this is what Tulsa looked like after this incident. 300 killed, 35 blocks destroyed. I want you to think about in Washington, D.C. Raise your hand if you have a business in D.C., in the DMV. Obviously, pretty much all of you. Imagine, so there's about 200, 250 people in here. That's about 300 businesses. Imagine all of your businesses gone. And you don't have insurance to recover it. What do? You've now lost your homes. Rosewood, Florida, up to 150 deaths. And to be key, these are forms of racial terror. Either the KKK or people acting as if they are the KKK, literally destroying black cities. What's key is where these are located at. Baltimore, St. Louis, Tulsa. Still black cities today. But cities that we talk about as if they are simply deplorable. It's a reason why they're that way. It's not by accident. I talked about the Homestead Act. Essentially what the Homestead Act said, and this is what's interesting, the Homestead Act was originally created for former slaves to be able to go south and head west and claim land. This was kind of part of this 40 acres and a mule that African Americans never got. And part of kind of thinking about their legacy is that African Americans are the only group to have been systematically discriminated against that have not received some sort of atonement for that, which a lot of people like to call reparations. Jews and Jewish Americans did. Japanese Americans did after World War II internment. Native Americans did after what most people know as Trail of Tears, but it was a lot more than that. They got a lot of land moving out west. They get payments. But that didn't happen for black Americans. This is the Homestead Act. You all see this red on this United States map? Those of you in the back should probably be able to see that. 270 million acres claimed from the Homestead Act that African Americans were restricted from the mid-1800s through the mid-1900s. So, if we're being specific, the Roosevelt, Rockefeller families that made a lot of money, particularly through railroads shipping things from east to west, that was land that they got from the Homestead Act. So we can directly link this. And this is where this legacy of the Freedmen's Bureau, which you all heard about, where money was literally stripped from African Americans, this is why this is so significant. This is why the 40 acres and a mule is so significant. African Americans were actually offered that, and a lot of people don't know the legacy. African Americans were offered 40 acres and a mule. And then what happened, Rutherford B. Hayes, in order for him to become president, Republicans, who was the party of Lincoln, and who African Americans primarily supported and were up until kind of the mid-20th century, that they made a deal with Southern Democrats. And what the deal was, is that in order for Rutherford B. Hayes to be president, we would strip back a lot of the progress, the racial progress that had been made in such a short period of time, which is called Reconstruction. There were more African Americans elected to Congress during that period than there were throughout the 20th century. This house is a house in Fairwood in Prince George's County. The reason why I put this up is because Prince George's County, as most of you probably know, is the most affluent African-American county in the United States. Fairwood is one of the most luxurious neighborhoods there. But this house, which was the plantation owner's house, still sits there. So I want to walk you through how this money operates. First thing, in the DC area, after slavery ended, DC area slave owners received reparations for their slaves. Raise your hand if you knew that. A couple people received reparations for their slaves. That's one way they made money. Second way they made money was then they kept the land. They were able to develop the land. Second way they made money. Third way they made money, then they sold that same land where African Americans worked on to African American affluent families, and the house still sits there. This isn't the only neighborhood that looks like this. Georgetown voted to do something about reparations. One thing you may or may not know is that Georgetown was basically able to sustain itself and become one of the best universities in the world because they actually sold a large number of slaves. And the students recently voted to pay like a $72.20 tax that kind of represented the 272 slaves that were sold. And then Georgetown is allowing for the descendants of those slaves to go to college tuition free. And really not tuition free. Like, I hate the free part. Like, as it suggests you getting a handout. No, like tuition paid back for stuff that's already being done. Uncle Nearest is another example. You should look up this story. Uncle Nearest actually created Jack Daniels. And to atone for this, Jack Daniels' descendants has funded an entire black-owned scotch and bourbon and whiskey, which is called Uncle Nearest. And honestly, it's really, really good. And I'm from Tennessee, so I know a lot about bourbon and whiskey. I'm gonna end with this. This house here that you see in the distance in his land is actually my family's land that my great-great-grandmother was a slave on, and my great-grandmother was born on. And for a lot of black women in particular, they went from working as slaves, as domestics, to then working as domestics with low pay. And that was my great-grandmother's role, taking care of the master's children. But when those children got grown, their father put in his will to give some of this land to Maggie Mitchell. And we fast forward 50 years, these 13 and a half acres is still in my family because of that atonement of those kids. So see, there are a lot of ways that we can make change. And those of you in here, you have the ability to do that. I want my kids, and I'm sure you want your kids and your grandkids, to grow up in a society where we don't have to keep talking about race or sexism or any other thing. And you know what? If we wanted a society like that, we can do something about it. And so I hope you'll go out and be a racial equity broker. I appreciate your time.